Hello and welcome to the Dr. Lake Show. This is Dr. Paola Lake. One other day here to do another podcast. Really looking forward to our show today. Before we get started, I want to do my introductions. Today I have a previous guest, Ginny Gossen here, a retired nurse. And we're going to talk about a really relevant topic on burnout, which I have a feeling, Ginny, you have some things to talk about in that department, do you not?
I do, absolutely.
Yeah.
I retired from nursing due to burnout. And so, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I've got a lot of experience with this. So, I'm happy to talk about this.
Well,
because it's a thing that nurses aren't really allowed to talk about, and it's a taboo, and so we don't, and it needs to be talked about.
I absolutely agree. I think these are experiences that are very visceral and happen, but without actually acknowledging it and focusing on it, it kind of goes under the radar, but it does show up in other ways, right? In terms of illness and time off and those types of issues. And I also want to acknowledge that my wonderful co-producer here, Dylan, is present with us as well. Hi, Dylan. Oh, I can't hear Dylan. Dylan, okay, he is with us. Whether you can hear him or not does not deny the fact that he's present. So I may be getting some communication from him in different means. So I guess for now, until Dylan is audible, it's you and I, Ginny.
Okay, all right. Well, we've done this before.
We have done this before. So, I wonder if you could just talk about some of the experiences right now. In watching the news, there's been a lot more conversation about burnout, or at the very least, the experiences nurses are having. I can't even imagine what it's like for them right now, let alone the fact that I always thought that the system was taxed before COVID, and then you add COVID. It's like a whole other experience. What thoughts do you have about that, Ginny?
Other than being incredibly grateful that I retired a year ago before this basically all hit, I can't imagine the pressure cooker that the hospitals are. I haven't been in hospital nursing for a long time. I've been occupational health on job sites, and then flight nursing and outpost nursing in the Arctic, and so it's been different. I mean, certainly stressful, very intense. It's taken its toll on me, but what the hospitals must be like now is absolutely, to say it's a pressure cooker and that it is absolutely not sustainable. And anybody who thinks that nurses, have wings on their back and halos on their head, and that we are, these special people that can go on forever because we somehow get, special dispensation from somewhere in the universe, and we can just continue on regardless of what happens, and that we have unlimited resources, that is absolute garbage. It's always been garbage. But we better be getting a very clear picture of what our first line responders are absolutely, the toll that it's taking, because we will not have anybody there anymore because there aren't unlimited resources. And so the job is incredibly difficult, has always been difficult. And this last, I would say, decade and a half, the last 10, 15 years, what's happened to nursing is absolutely atrocious. The profession is completely different. And now with the stressors of COVID, this is absolutely not sustainable. And those people that are going to work every day are absolute heroes. And heroes don't wear capes, and they don't have wings on their back, and they don't have unlimited resources. This is a crisis, and we need to pay attention.
I agree. And I've always actually, because I have worked with some nurses experiencing burnout, and I've seen some pretty, it can, when we go into a complete burnout exhaustion in the more severe case, I remember meeting someone who she described herself as having a adrenal burnout. She literally, all the energy was sucked out of her body. It's and anything became a challenge, from getting up in the morning to even thinking about going to work. It was not something that was even feasible for her. And I think what's hard is, even if you're younger and you have a lot of energy, you can still burn out all that energy that you've got in you, and find yourself in a state of burnout over time, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it isn't just, us older nurses who burn out. The system is so difficult to work in, and the demands are so difficult, and there's nowhere. Our association is not helpful at all. Mm-hmm. There's nowhere to go. There's no resources, because to say that you're burning out, no, you're supposed to be this, heavenly being that never loses her temper, that never gets tired, that will always go the extra mile, because that's what nurses are and that's what nurses do. And nobody, including our profession, our association, and most nurses, many times will not absolutely say, you know what, this isn't okay. We're not like that. We aren't these, heavenly beings. We are human beings, and our resources are gone. And it is happening to young nurses. And we have pushed, and the system is just so unsustainable. Nursing, as it is today, is so unsustainable that we're burning out nurses that should have many, many years to go. But absolutely not, because there finally are only so many resources that a person has. You only have so much emotional energy.
Right.
And when the system and the people have sucked it out of you, and you do not replace it, and you're not allowed to replace it, and you're not allowed to talk about these things, because after all, a nurse doesn't burn out, because we're just these heavenly beings. And there's always another patient, and there's always another family, and there's always another need, and the bells keep ringing, and it just goes on and on and on. And then when you say, you know what, I have to take some time off. Oh, no. If you were a real dedicated nurse, then don't you understand that you need to work overtime? And don't you understand that you should be here every day? Because really, that's what being a nurse is all about. And when you say, no, I'm going to make myself priority, there is an enormous pushback to that.
Well, it's funny. So, I'm sorry, I was doing some reading on burnout, of course, and, being the topic that it is right now, very relevant. One psychologist, her name is Emily Nagoski. Now, she took a very, let's say, perhaps a focus on women, but one of the terms she used is, and I thought that was an interesting term, the human giver syndrome. Sort of based on that idea that, there are, if we look in the past, the roles of men and women, and she does differentiate the different expectations, but that women are generally oriented to be giving, oriented to nurturing the environment. So we already have that as a baseline, and I think right now, because of COVID and nursing, it's especially a relevant topic. But I also want to point out that we have a general cultural attitude in our culture that yes, we have lots of resources to try and teach people how to cope and how to manage. But on a more broader cultural perspective, we in terms of businesses and their acknowledgement of, you're talking about nursing, we have lots of first responders that burn out. I know a lot of medical physicians burn out. Certainly, burnout can happen across populations. I was doing some look in the Gallup polls research. These are some of the statistics I found. We're having in the UK, there's up to 57% of people that will describe burnout 50% of the United States. I don't have right now anything in Canada, 37% in Spain, 7% in Germany. So,
those are huge numbers.
Those are huge numbers. In 2019, the World Health Organization declared burnout an occupational phenomenon in its global standards for diagnostic health info through the International Classification of Diseases. So, I think it's the palpable consequences of having, let's say, with the emphasis on productivity, and I do think economy plays into it, because as 2008, I know there was a shift with the economic collapse, that fewer people were being pressured to do the job, let's say, of several people, because through economizing, we put a lot of those demands on the individual to fill up the roles of a lot. And I think in the health industry, certainly with nurses, that became an issue. Did you not notice that, Ginny, through the course of your work?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When I started nursing, I graduated 33 years ago. And what was considered staffing, normal, healthy, safe staffing, is now a completely different picture. Mm-hmm. Now, and the acuity has only gotten worse. Patients are sicker than they've ever been. So I was on general floor for a first year, and then I went into critical care. That's really what interests me, and I spent my career in critical care, very intense job, and enjoyed it. It was great, but it took its toll. But the acuity of the patients that are on general population, just on general med floors now, they are way sicker than a patient that was on a med surge floor when I graduated nursing. Wow. So when you had 5 patients, and an LPN to help you, that was completely manageable. Yeah. And we could give out our meds in a timely fashion. We got to know our patients. We actually did care. We did proper dressing changes. We did back rubs. We actually cared for our patients and actually understood when they were having trouble, and we could really assess them, and because we got to know them well enough. There's no such thing now. There's no such thing. Nobody's doing assessments. You don't have time. Yeah. You don't have time. So these hugely sick people are on the floors because the ICUs are full, emerge is full. There's nowhere for them to go. They have to stay out on the floor. Yeah. But you don't have the staffing. So there isn't the RN, LPN, and care aide. There might be maybe one RN. There's a lot more LPNs, and now there's care aides, and everybody is just going flat out. Yeah. Nobody's assessing. Nobody's watching. Yeah. There just isn't time. And now you put COVID on top of an incredibly stressed system. Oh, this isn't manageable. This isn't sustainable at all.
Well, I even wonder, because I think there's a personality. I mean, of course, there are individual differences between people, but people that go into nursing I would imagine, already have that general tendency. And from my observations, at the very least, when I'm working with nurses, they go into the profession with already a predisposition to putting themselves in the back burner. So the caregivers often can get in the position of giving until they have nothing left to give. And I don't know if you've noticed it as a bit of a personality trait with nurses as well, that desire to give and really have a hard time even thinking about putting time in for themselves, because you're always under demand and there's always an expectation. So it must be so hard to say no when there's an actual need there. And now when we're talking life and death with COVID, I would imagine it's escalated that.
Oh, it's absolutely horrendous. I mean, how do you say no? Sure. there's a certain personality. It is a giving, nurturing personality that goes into these professions. You're hoping, because other than that, what are you doing in this profession?
Yeah.
And so, absolutely. And when there's just need upon need upon need, I mean, when I was flying, medevacing, it was bronchiolitis season one year up in the Arctic, and I just had the plane load just crammed with kids. And I thought, wow, I really shouldn't be taking all these kids. But who do you leave behind? My pilots were going to X out, time out. And this was the last flight. And these kids were so sick. Who do you leave behind? I didn't leave anybody behind. I piled them all in, and we all went down to Yellowknife to the hospital. What child am I leaving behind that night? And I knew no plane was coming to get them. Right. That's
a big burden to carry, right? Because it's
a huge, it's huge responsibility. It's huge burden. And when you are on the floor, like those girls, well, I shouldn't just say girls, but people, men, women who are doing these jobs and are doing it because they care. And you go home every day from the hospital knowing you have not done your best because there simply wasn't time. Yeah. There wasn't resources. When you go home every day feeling, oh man, I know I didn't do everything I wanted to do today for those people. Right. Actual needs were not met because I simply didn't have time and resources. That is a huge factor in hospital burnout.
It's a huge factor. Huge factor. And I'm going to talk about, just bring up a couple of points of what they found things that contribute, at least in the workplace, to burnout. I don't want to make it sound like work is the only place we can burn out. We can burn out in many different arenas in our life, by too many demands over time. But there are certainly certain professions that have been identified as having a greater likelihood of burnout, which I always think is interesting. But these are some things they found that contribute, and I've definitely seen this in my practice with many of the clients I've encountered. Unfair treatment at work, I've certainly seen when they're feeling there's mistreatment or bullying or even inconsistent compensation. Those are different factors that go into it. An unmanageable workload, which is what you're referring to. Basically your confidence erodes over time because no amount of giving is enough to feel that it's enough. And I think it's living in this constant place where at the end of the day, we all want to finish the day feeling that we accomplished something and that we finished the majority of what was important to do. But it's that chronic feeling that you didn't do enough over the course of time, that you're never able to live up to the standards that have been put in front of you. The other contributor that they found in the workplace as far as burnout is unclear communication from managers, inconsistencies, and leaving employees to try to figure out what the expectations are. So not really being clear about the benchmarks for success, right. And especially the poorer the communication, the more those kind of confusions can surface for the employees, and really, again, creating that feeling internally that, okay, I don't even know what is expected of me, and yet what I do never seems to be hitting the mark. And the other part is, which you had referred to, is the lack of, let's say, manager support, even compassion, even an understanding. And I think one thing that can be really hard is feeling that somehow if you're not able to meet that benchmark, that the failure is yours. And it's not a failure on a broader scale, that the failure could be the failure of the system, where we're not really providing adequate resources for people to be able to take care of themselves while they're doing their job, and perhaps not even an acknowledgement of that, which I think is what you're referring to, is it not?
Absolutely. I mean, you've just hit so many things, on the head, and
Mm-hmm.
and I and my colleagues, I know, take it personally, that it's a personal failure,
Yeah.
and we do. We
Yeah.
consider it a personal failure. And so when you're in an unsustainable, and there is a lot of unspoken finger pointing from administration, from our own association, other nurses, that absolutely there's this unspoken, law, and it is your fault. How come you can't function in this? Because really, if you were that good of a nurse, you should be able to do this. And we take that to heart, and it is very, very toxic and corrosive to to the inside heart that we carry. It is very toxic.
Well, it creates certainly an atmosphere for people to feel some shame, and feel that somehow they're failing. And I've certainly known in my practice that some of the things that need to be unwrapped for them is rebuilding a sense that it's not a personal failing. Sometimes the backdrop of it can be there's nurses I know that aren't even just caretaking in the hospital setting or in their work setting, but they're also end up doing caretaking within their own home environment. So it becomes this ever-flowing, releasing of all that. Every ounce of energy that exists is depleted by the course of a day. And one thing I'd like people to understand is when we're not talking about a day of stress in life, we can't avoid stress in life. We're talking about a chronic state. And when we get stuck in a chronic state, and we feel we can't escape it, it's the long-term, constant pressure in these contexts that will eventually deplete you of the resources, the internal resources to be able to function. And here's one thing I pulled this out of The Body Says No. I don't know if you would actually listen to that, which gives a little bit of a description of what happens to our body when we're under chronic stress. So what happens in our body? There's electrical changes, chemical and hormonal discharges that happen within the nervous system. So our body's equipped to handle a certain amount of it. When we become aware of a threat, which a threat could be, as you were talking, Ginny, you're not going to leave one child behind, right? And the threat was that you would leave a child behind. Those kind of expectations we put on ourselves are those very high standards, or maybe unrealistic standards even, create a threat internally, because there is a sense of urgency that you need to meet demands that may be not reasonable. That triggers some operations in the brain. It triggers the hypothalamus, which is essentially in the brainstem. This releases a hormone called CARH. This hormone travels to the pituitary gland at the base of your skull, which then releases another hormone called ACTH. Blood carries ACTH to the adrenals, located in the fatty tissue in the kidney. Adrenals secrete cortisol, which acts on almost every tissue and organs, and then the immune system is suppressed. As every time we're stressed and in that fight or flight mode, you have the blood that diverts away from your organs to your muscles, and it keeps you in that place of chronic hyperarousal, and our body can't take it for that long, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. No,
body cannot take it, and if the longer we are in that state, the more the consequences. Right now, when they look at the effect on work, 63% are more likely to take a sick day when they are experiencing burnout. They're half as likely to discuss an approach to performance goals with their manager, so they might even shut down. 23% are likely to visit the emergency room, and 2.6 times as likely to leave their current employer. 13% end up losing confidence in themselves. And I think it can be a huge blow to self-esteem. Those things you connect with?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it does. And I have to say, you are the first person who has actually said in clear words that burnout robs you of your confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And it is just this push, push, push. And when you can't keep up, then the system throws you away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I used to be this really sharp professional, and now I've been thrown away. Yeah. That, there's a whole part to that as well. And so
it affects, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
It affects everything. And so it's kind of an all encompassing, and we just don't realize what stress, like you've just explained, the global effect that stress has on mind, body, and soul.
It does.
And burnout does as well.
Yeah.
And there is no part of your life that does not get affected. Yeah. And we need to realize that. And especially now, yes, first responders have had burnout and we're, I suppose, talking about it to some degree, but we better get ourselves organized and prepared for the amount of burnout that we're going to have from hospital workers and frontline workers with this COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to get very serious about this and realize that, yes, in fact, this is happening, and we need to be able to have resources for these people when they absolutely, totally collapse.
Well, it needs to be addressed. I think I've always personally wanted, it's the valuing of self. I think what ends up happening is in the saving, it's like trying to save someone that's drowning in water and you get pulled under. And for me, that is... that really kind of is an example or a metaphor for how we look at self. Self kind of gets obliterated in the course of trying to help. And I think it's wonderful that we're putting ourselves out there to help others. But in the neglecting of that person that within you, which is self, you may end up finding yourself in that place. I know for myself, I've had some periods of burnout, partly in my profession, and had to really take a step back and say, what do I need to do to feed this? Let's say I've loved the emotional bank account metaphor. I don't know if you've heard that one, but the deposits. Imagine emotional bank account. The deposits are the elements that you need that give you life and vibrancy and energy. And energy is, we sort of take it for granted. We assume energy is infinite. Energy is not infinite. So we need to think about what deposits can we put in that bank account that are going to refill what has been emptied in our withdrawals. So everything you give is a withdrawal. All that depletes you of energy is a withdrawal from your bank account. And if your withdrawals, and this is a fact, if the withdrawals continue to be much larger than the deposits, if you're taking out vast amounts of withdrawals, what happens over time is you end up bankrupt. And that is exactly the process. And it's an insidious process. I know times I've had tons of energy, and which is amazing to have tons of energy, but I used up every drop of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. It's, we don't have to use every drop that we have. I think it has to start from us individually recognizing it and also as a culture recognizing it, because only in the culture recognizing it can they support it for the individual employee, which would be nursing or any other industry that is has a likelihood of experiencing some kind of burnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was just very interesting in some of the therapy that I've done and some of the workbooks, and trying to go through this burnout, and they were just saying, we function in a green area, which is good and healthy. Mm-hmm. Then there's the yellow warning signs,
yes.
Okay, and then red.
Yeah,
and part of the exercise was to name and be very specific about what are your green areas, what are your yellow areas, and what are your red areas. And I had functioned in red for so many years that I had no idea. Yeah. I had no idea what my yellow areas. I mean, what are the things that I know that I'm starting to get a little stressed or a little when I'm starting to get unhealthy. Well, I don't know. I was in red for so many years. I don't know.
Were you aware that you were in red at the time you were in red? Okay.
No.
So
absolutely not.
And why do you think you weren't aware of it at that time?
Because for so many years, and I did enjoy the intense. I've had a very intense career, mm-hmm. and I enjoyed it. And there's a mystique that goes along with being able to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And when we were in ICU, we were the cream of the crop in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And everybody wanted the sickest patients. You wanted to be known as the nurse that could take on the sickest patients.
So there was a status symbol to taking on. Yeah. Wow.
It's huge status.
Wow.
And I enjoyed the adrenaline.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy colds and flus and, hangnails. I don't enjoy that kind of work.
Yeah.
I do enjoy and I gravitate to the intense work. Yeah. And I always have done that.
Yeah.
And it just became a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And this intense career, absolutely, I allowed it to take over my life and was in the red for so long that was my normal until all of a sudden, wow, things aren't working all that well anymore.
Wow.
Well, what the heck? And I had this big career. It took a while because I kept pushing because this is my normal. This is what has worked for me for so long. And we need to just slow down and give ourselves permission to say, this no longer works for me, and I need to figure out why.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And I pushed until, I had a big collapse.
Well, and that's where I think it's so important for that to be, this to be a point of conversation that also happens more in the workplace. One of the things they've really talked about is the importance that we need to educate managers and employers about burnout, and that there becomes a space, remembering that it's in their best interest, because longevity. I remember someone I was talking to, and we were talking about certain issues around, healthcare and dealing with seniors. And one thing she would always say, remember that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And when we're in a marathon is that concept that it's a long road. It's a long road that doesn't end. When we're doing sprints, we can put our 100% of energy into a sprint because there's a beginning and then there's an end. When we're talking about an unending, foreseeable process of being engaged on a daily basis at that level, as you mentioned, adrenaline, that is why we need to change the way that we look at any career that has long-lasting pressures. I know that this is existed in many different professions. I actually found a list here of the most stressful jobs of 2019. This again is by one of the Gallup explorations here with different population, different groups. There's enlisted military. They found 72% can experience burnout. Firefighters in the 70s.
Yeah.
Airline pilots, 60. Police officers, 51%. And I, because I work with police officers, I definitely see it as an issue. Especially, again, we're dealing with greater expectations for a smaller group of people, higher demands with smaller resources, event coordinators, newspaper reporters, even senior corporate taxi drivers can go through it. So it is and it has financial consequences because what I see, and when people come to me, let's say they're taking time off work because of burnout, sometimes that burnout can last for years. Sometimes the consequence of it can be depression, loss of sense of purpose. These are things I think we need to start thinking about so that we can prevent that, so that it's actually in the long run. I think when they've done some look at outcomes for productivity in the workplace, companies and organizations that think about the well-being of their employees are less likely to have them taking time off work, going into taking sick leave, performance drops, enthusiasm, even efficacy ends up dropping when people are going through burnout.
Yeah. No, your idea of the marathon is so smart, because Mother Teresa did that, actually.
Oh.
She was in it for the long haul.
Right.
And she just said, this isn't sustainable. Sitting with these people and the work that she was planning to do, this isn't sustainable without wellness. So she took some of the money that she was given and she created a retreat for her nuns. And she put them on rotation.
Yeah.
And they worked with, the population for a rotation of days. And then they went to this retreat and they got cared for.
Yeah.
And their meals were prepared for them. It was a lovely place. It was very restful. There were, tablecloths on the table. It was a lovely place. It was quiet. And that's where they restored their own energy and then went back, because she said, I'm in it for the long haul here.
Yeah.
But this hugely demanding work is not sustainable if I do not care for myself and my own nuns. Yeah. And so she created a retreat for them because she knew it was a marathon, and she knew without caring for themselves, it was not possible to sustain. And she was in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
And she put her nuns on rotation. And she, on their days off, they went to this very lovely retreat and they got cared for. So very smart lady, and we need to be a little bit more like Mother Teresa. Yes, there are needs, and we, need to have a purpose, and we need to help out and pitch in, but we also need to care for ourselves, or it's not sustainable.
I just want to acknowledge that there's a dog barking in the background. Okay. This is my wonderful, you'll see her on Instagram, Stella, a mini golden doodle, and she's definitely a stress release, and on occasion can elevate my heart rate. But otherwise...
But that's the thing. What's your stress relief, right? Where do you go for your retreat?
Yes.
And so Mother Teresa made this retreat for her nuns. That's great.
Yeah.
But we all need to create a retreat for ourselves and get to know what are your green areas, what are your yellow areas before you get to the red.
I think that's a brilliant way for us to start to take responsibility. I think I'm looking at it from two different standpoints, and one of them is the cultural responsibility, the employer's responsibility to understand burnout. Because if we always say it's just about us, I think we are much more powerful when we are collectively unified in towards a stance that puts well-being as a priority. And the one thing I would love organizations to understand is, while it may seem that they are putting aside or slowing down the wheel of productivity by encouraging people to do self-care, they're actually creating instead a workforce of people that are going to be there in a sustainable fashion, that are not going to go on sick leave, that are going to always give you the peak performance that they can possibly give you, because their well-being is taken into consideration. So, I think let's change mindset around well-being. Instead of it being a superfluous, frivolous need, we actually see it as an integral part of keeping employees and workers well. And I always think they love the language of maintaining productivity and economic benefits, and those economic benefits and productivity are, I think, more guaranteed if you're actually looking after the individual in the workplace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very interesting. I've worked with industry a lot as an occupational health nurse. And, having these conversations and trying, to make certain management styles, because some managers are, they're understanding this concept, and there are some that are absolutely not. And trying to get them to understand that, the people are a resource. They're not a liability.
Yeah.
They're a resource. And that resource needs to be a renewable resource. And
absolutely.
Yes. Right. And this is how you keep people happy. Happy people are productive people, healthy, happy people. And yes, they'll banter that around. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They know that. Yeah. Then that allows, then you have to make allowances for them to have balance in their life. Mm-hmm. And wellness is not just, a woo-woo crap. That's a bunch of woo-woo crap. No, it's not.
No,
it's how people maintain health.
Absolutely.
And Mother Teresa knew that her nuns needed to maintain their personal, mental, and physical and emotional and a spiritual wellness.
Absolutely.
And she factored that into her long-term plan.
Yeah.
And when companies do not factor, any company does not factor that into their long-term plan, they short-circuit themselves.
They do.
There's just no way around
I
that.
think for anyone that is interested in peak performance, and you look at peak performance at work, some of the better organizations are really the ones who encourage a model that looks at the individual employee on different levels, building on their strengths rather than their weakness, giving them a real sense of accomplishment as you draw on the employee's strengths, sustaining them in supporting them in times when they might need some time for self-care, balancing out the demands. And these are things I think that a company needs to be fully aware of, and to stop the thought that of course there's going to be demands. I think especially now with COVID, none of this means that the demand disappears. I don't even know how realistic it is for the select number of nurses that exist to be able to, in the long run, be pushed on a level and continue. There will be people dropping out and burning out. I have no doubt about
Absolutely.
it.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah. So
it's not sustainable because the system was stressed already.
It was.
So, we're not talking healthy, well-balanced people anyway. Yeah. You're talking a stressed out workforce anyway.
Yeah.
And a system that is, really quite broken. And then you've added COVID. Oh, no.
So perhaps, we can look at that end of it, which is the cultural, and then there's the personal end, because we can do our part in trying to educate organizations and company in sustaining well-being of their employees. One thing that I look at, and they've mirrored here in some of the readings, is looking at the 5 elements of well-being. I've otherwise seen it as the wheel of life. You'll see that in coaching terms, in coaching context, you'll see this idea. And when we're trying to evaluate our life, what you want to look at your life is not in a unidimensional perspective. For our well-being, we have certain needs. Career is one of them, certainly. But we need good physical health. That's a need. It's a need. So we need to take care of our body, both physically and also emotionally. We have community needs to feel part of the community, to be able to spend time to the community. We have financial needs. We have social needs. I think we have, in the wheel of life, we also look at things like self-development. We need to grow. We need to be spending time cultivating our own well-being. So these are needs, and what happens is when the entirety of our life gets consumed by this unidimensional demand, whether it's work or just giving to others, those parts of our life start to fall away, and we spend less and less time taking care of those pieces. And I do believe that where the areas of our lives that we neglect are the areas that wither. There's a way that they talk about when we look at the brain, and we say, and we do use the same concept with the muscles. If you don't use something or put your energy into it, it kind of shrivels. And if you don't use it, in techno, if you don't use it, you lose it. So we need to be paying attention to areas of our lives that are important for our well-being, rather than seeing it as frivolous, seeing it as selfish. We need to change that mindset. And instead of looking at it as frivolous, think of it as if your car was running out of gas, would you just keep on driving?
Right? Exactly.
Right? I'm sure that you would think, okay, you know what? I'm running on empty. I better fill the gas tank. It is not any different with us. We are human beings like plants. Plants need sun, they need water, and humans have these needs. And there is no doubt we can soldier on. And I think the work ethic, which we, as a culture, I think we've totally valued people being busy. Remember, the busier you are, the more valuable you are. And we need to change a cultural mindset, but we also need to change our individual mindset. It really starts with us, because as we change it, that's when we can start to have an impact on the larger society and perhaps put some pressures on there. So I know, because time passes quickly, one thing I'd like to do is to spend a few minutes talking about what are the things that we can do individually for ourselves as we're trying to navigate, prevent burnout. And I'd like to say sustain peak performance, sustain our ability to be filling up that cup before we empty it, so that we have something left to give. So one thing I do have is changing the mindset. I actually created on my podcast, there is an app. It's not an app, sorry. On my podcast, The Dr. Lake Show, I have a meditation hypnosis audio that I created for caregivers. One of the things I find that caregivers struggle with is guilt and a sense internally that they're spending time for themselves could be selfish. We have some beliefs, I think, that we need to start changing. That particular meditation is intended to, over time, start to change beliefs, such as understanding that the more you fill up your cup, the more you're going to have to give. So it's not a selfish act to take care of yourself. It's actually a responsible act. In doing so, you are making sure that your well-being is valued as much as that of others. And in doing so, that you will continue to be able to have that resource to give others. So that's important. I don't know what thoughts you have about that, Ginny.
Absolutely. And we do need to change our perceptions. And it is as simple as, how foolish are you to run your car out of gas?
Yeah.
We would consider ourselves foolish.
Yeah, definitely.
Passing, and you have a little gauge that tells you, and you're passing gas station after gas station. But that's exactly what we do to ourselves. And, burnout is not, you're not weak.
No.
You've run out of gas.
You've run out of gas.
So how foolish are you? And how foolish was I to keep pushing till I ran out of gas to the extent that I did?
Well, Ginny, I would never say that that's foolish, because I think the pressures that exist in our society and the accolades given to meeting these impossible demands are supported. And I think it's so easy to get caught on that treadmill. What I think can help us is just becoming aware. And, even in having these conversations, maybe someone can start to think about where they're at, because there are symptoms you can pay attention to internally. Feeling physically exhausted is one of them, depleted, just not having the energy. Another one is starting to depersonalize, when you see yourself becoming cynical or sarcastic. There's a term now they call compassion fatigue. We get put so much of ourselves emotionally out there that we have nothing left, that we might even over time start feeling that we're losing compassion. And I actually have a belief that when we start losing compassion for ourselves, it's harder to extend that outside of us. The other one is lack of efficacy. You have a constant feeling that you're just never doing enough. You're never measuring up. And I think, paying attention to those symptoms is important, and using those as a sign that you might need to start doing something for yourself. And if you do have, let's say, the human giver syndrome, I think sometimes it can be embedded in us from a young age. If you were born a caretaker, your home environment. I know people that maybe have had parents with addictions or have ended up playing parent roles when they're kids. They grow up into adults being caregivers with everybody, and they never learned that from a really young age, that their own time spent on self has value. And I think changing some of those is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, we've talked about the lies that we tell ourselves and, on previous shows. And I think this plays into that, because we do tell ourselves, and we let the culture, we accept those cultural lies. And we need to just step back and say, what is my truth? What works for me? And giving ourselves the permission, because quite a long time ago, you were talking about letting go of things that don't work for you. Yeah. And it was a radio show that you and I did. And I was in the process of just starting to realize how incredibly burnt out I was. And that just really spoke to me. And I was like, oh my goodness. Yes, giving myself permission to say, this no longer works for me. It used to work really well. Yeah. But giving myself the permission to say, this no longer works for me. And I'm allowed to walk away from this. It doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me a quitter. Yeah. This is completely healthy, okay, and should be applauded. When this no longer works for me, I am allowed to walk away. And we should be able to feel that that's okay. Yeah. And if that's one point I want to get across in this podcast, it is healthy, it is okay, and let us applaud the people who stand back, reevaluate, and say, this no longer works for me.
I
going.
I totally 100% agree with that. I like the concept which has been out there spoken about friendships. Friendships come into our lives a season, a reason, or a lifetime. For a season, a reason, or a lifetime. And I think that actually applies for everything in our lives. And there might have even been a season where putting out more energy was the right time to put out that energy.
Sure.
I know if we look at Erik Erikson looked at the stages of our lives and some of the issues, what are the main objectives in certain periods of our lives? In our 30s might be a time of cultivating our career. We put in that extra energy to make it happen. We put our focus and time in that. But there's a season to that. And as we also get older, our energy changes, our energy level. We have to, at a level, be paying attention to even the changing within us of those resources and start to notice. I used to be able to do 100 of these at one time, and now I'm not doing as much. Maybe that's an indicator that, you need some more time for self. I think what I always like to do when I work with people is start to think about a vision of your life and how, if you could create it with the kind of balance. If you looked at the wheel of life and you said, what have I been neglecting in my life? What have I put aside? How have I, neglected to take care of this part of me, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical? And what do I need to do to fill it? And more often than not, when I work with that and people are trying to fill areas they've neglected, it comes with a lot of limiting beliefs, as you and I mentioned, the lies that we tell ourselves that have stopped us from being able to take care of those. So you need to also figure out what are the beliefs I have that are stopping me. And once you've challenged them, you use your vision of what you would like as that template. I think, you can have a life coach that helps you. Coaches are intended to help you work through blocks to getting what you want. You could go to see a therapist. You could start some of your own work. I know that I ran into was a handout really that was online. It was about online supports for COVID-19 stress. And one of the things that's indicated is Canadians are not using online supports for accessing, support resources as we're going through this. The Canadian Mental Health Association has a bounce back program. It's called bouncebackbc.ca. Right now it's available in BC, Manitoba, and Ontario. There's Wellness Together Canada. That's a website for that is ca.portal.gs/. That's a federally funded program. There's wellcan.ca. It's a resource developed and funded by corporate, community, and public sectors. And Ontarians also have a free access to for-profit cognitive behavioral therapy program at McBeacon. It's mcbeacon.com during COVID-19 pandemic. So we need to know what resources are out there and access them. But I think knowing, becoming aware, self-aware, and starting to take time, little things. You don't have to start big, right, Ginny? We don't have to do big things. Start taking a walk out in nature every day and preserve even 15 minutes. For people that are not used to taking care of themselves, one of the things I'll say is start small, because, develop a comfort with the 5 minutes. In fact, I think I saw a physician who had published a book on 5-minute exercises just to change your state in short periods. Start to build up some resources. It could be a walk. It could be a 5-minute meditation. It could be taking some time out to do something that you love, like play an instrument. Put self first. Feed yourself. Give yourself time to nurture the things that give you energy. So think about what your deposits are. What are the things in your past that have helped you feel good, that have given you energy, start thinking about filling that pot. And if you're struggling with that, if you're struggling with coming up with ideas, it could be a sign of just how depleted you are. And,
Yeah,
that is a
absolutely.
good time to seek some outside support, because when we are tired and we've lost confidence and we're a little bit depressed, our creative mindset diminishes. We actually can lose confidence in our own decision making, right? And knowing that we're making right choices. And, it is important to be able to reach out and get that support. I don't know if you have any other thoughts about that, about what people can do to make that difference.
Well, and just to step back and be aware of what they're feeling and why they're feeling.
Yeah.
And start to, because it took me a long time to figure out where my yellow zone was.
Yeah.
So, like, why am I so, what triggers my anger? What triggers my irritability?
Yeah.
What's the core of that? Just step back and start watching your feelings, your responses to things, and start journaling and just get to know where your stressors are and why and how you react like that, and just get to know your own emotions, because we've been going for so long without paying attention.
Yeah.
Please start paying attention to your own responses and start journaling and get to know your responses and why you feel the way you do.
Start really enhancing your awareness, and if you're noticing some things are off, is a good time to unpack it, because sometimes we know what we're experiencing, but we haven't actually taken the time to put the words to it and understand what it is. Every time I see my boss, my heart rate goes up, or when I think of saying no to work, I feel incredible guilt. And
why? Why? And just follow that through. How come I feel guilty? And what are the images that come up with that? And if you can't do that by yourself, if you can't unpack that by yourself, there's lots of help out there. And maybe you do need to help you unpack that, but you need to know why that guilt feeling, or why that irritating, or why I get angry. It doesn't really seem to have too much basis. Why is that? You need to unpack those emotions. Absolutely.
And even understanding even your workplace environment, because sometimes if it's an environment that neglects the value of individual self-care and has an overall attitude of stigmatizing people that want self-care, you might need to even look at that work environment and reconsider whether it's the best environment, or whether there's anything you can change about it. And there's a lot of factors. I do think right now with the podcasts that are out there, with some of the free resources we have, and that's why I keep pointing out other resources. One book I suggest for people that want to understand a little bit about the connection between our body and our well-being is The Body Says No. It's a book by Gabor Mate. Right now, with the many multiple meditations, I really think things that can feed you is take some time away from your normal habits. It might be that you do to decompress, which might be normally you sit down, have a glass of wine, and watch TV. And I think that's wonderful if that helps you feel good for a little bit. But make sure that you're monitoring what even things you're doing that are escalating how you're feeling. I could be watching lots of drama and murder and killing after a day of working, if I was a police officer with a lot of crime. We need to, I always think we take our brain for granted. The brain is like a sponge. This sponge absorbs what we're surrounding ourselves with, whether there's a lot of negativity around us. We absorb it. Right now we know about mirror neurons. Even just being around a lot of negativity in our brain, it mirrors what we're experiencing around us. So be mindful of what you're exposing yourself to. That includes at work, not only work, but even your personal life. If there's a lot of conflict that you're going through, if there's a lot of negativity you're surrounded by. Negativity, we already have a brain that's predisposed towards being negative. So then it would be about being intentional about bringing into your brain things that are positive. I make a point of actually looking for inspirational stories, things that feel good inside, because they're the things that remind me that there's more than just what we see every day in the news. As they've been talking about COVID burnout. I'm sure you've heard of that term. Mm-hmm. We're watching COVID stories every day. Wonderful. We need to be informed, but let's also remember to fill the pot, because we are the people. Ultimately, the better we are individually as a society, the better choices and decisions we can make for our society. I think those we need to be well to contribute to the wellness of our society. So let's start with us, and then we can start launching forward into looking at having an influence on the system.
Absolutely.
So are we exhausted our thoughts? I one of the things I want to say is no hour conversation can exhaust certain points, all the points that might be relevant to it. Right now, if you're interested in even adding a contributing thought that I may have overlooked, please feel free to contact us at podcast@drlake.ca. That is one way. Also, you can go online and look at the drlakeshow.ca. So these are some resources and ways that you can access our podcast, also to send us information. Would love to hear your feedback. And Ginny, I always enjoy talking to you. You're full of life and passion.
Well, it is. We just have these incredibly interesting conversations, and it is usually something, that I am very passionate about. And of course this is, I'm not quite finished with my burnout. It's amazing. If somebody would tell me that I would burn out this badly, it would take this long, to get completely back on my feet.
It does.
Shocking. But it is, and so, and I just see, my colleagues in the hospitals, and I'm like, oh my, I just see the tsunami of burnout coming, and there's just really, no way to stop it. And so my heart goes out to anybody who's out there, and because this is just going to be, it is, and is going to continue to be, a damaging, toxic thing. And we just push and push and push because we have believed the lies that we are supposed to, and we are supposed to carry on, and it is not sustainable. So absolutely.
Well,
give yourself permission.
Absolutely. And right now, as you're tending to your own burnout, I know that contributed to one of your retirement decision, is recognizing it. And so how are you doing right now as you're navigating burnout?
Well, better, but it is, there's still physical, limitations. So I'm not physically 100% back. Emotionally, not as well. Not 100%, but certainly way better than a year ago. Absolutely. And just, it's been so long since I have done self-care that I do it for a little bit, and then it's not a habit. It's not, and you kind of fall off the wagon, and you regress. There's just no doubt about it. And you say, oh, I'm not doing it right, because I haven't been making those emotional deposits. So, it's a learned behavior.
It is a learned behavior.
And like
I absolutely agree with that.
It is.
Well,
the saying. There's this little saying that I'm learning to love the sound of my feet walking away from something that is not meant for me. And that really struck me.
Good for you.
And I was like, I need to walk away from this, because, as Dr. Lake says, it no longer works for me. And that's okay. So it is a completely relearning, reinventing, and it's interesting. It's a little bit of an odyssey.
Yeah.
in the middle of COVID, but you know what? It's a good thing. And I'm progressing. You know,
It's a
slow,
good learning. Yeah.
but it's a good learning thing. You bet. And these are learned behaviors, and I need to unlearn some things, and I need to relearn better things.
And even to have a little bit of compassion for that, what you had learned, because I know for myself, I'm a yes person, in the sense that I love doing things. But I always have to remember myself in that planning. Oops, I have something going off here. Excuse the alarm. Wrong alarm, not for here. So Ginny, it's been awesome talking to you again today, as usual, and I'm sure we'll have another interesting conversation to join in.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on today. It's something that I really enjoy this topic and enjoy our conversations, and appreciate being on today.
So we will chat again, Ginny. I know that for a fact, and I hope you keep well, and I hope that your journey of recovering from your own burnout progresses along. I know it's a hit and miss, and you keep working at it. So I appreciate that you're actually taking that time. So I wish you all the best, Ginny.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. And thank you to listeners tuning in. I always enjoy being here, and I hope that you are going to use this as an opportunity to see where you're at and how you are doing in your well-being, and start paying attention to yourself and see what you might need to get yourself back on your feet. Wishing you all the best. Until next time, take good care.